I got $1 buying me a newspaper.
Preparations are underway in Puerto Rico as Hurricane George closes in. Food supplies and building materials were in demand as residents prepare for the storm. More than 1,600 people are said to be evacuated to shelters in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Good morning and thanks for joining us on Weather Center. I'm Vivian Brown. We'll have the complete details on Hurricane George in 30 seconds. Elsewhere, you'll see partly cloudy skies today in Dallas with temperatures nearing the century mark. You'll need your umbrella today in St. Louis as scattered showers are expected throughout the day. And the skies in New York will be partly cloudy today with temperatures in the mid-80s. Now for the latest on Hurricane George, let's join Rick Griffin in the Forecast Center.
Thanks a lot, Vivian, and good morning. Well, George, not quite as powerful as we saw during the day on Sunday when the hurricane was at Category 4 status. Now George, a very strong Category 2. Even with the weakening, still a potentially very dangerous and devastating situation for the islands in the Northeast Caribbean. Let's take a look at the latest information we have for you on Hurricane George. First, the position, if you're plotting the storm with us. It's located at 17.5 north, 63.7 west. Now about 165 miles east-southeast of San Juan, Puerto Rico, about 60 miles east of St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, and about 80 miles east-southeast of St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. And just a little bit later, we'll take a look at a radar picture that'll show you very clearly where the eye of George is located. Top sustained winds 110, and George continues to move steadily west-northwest at 17. The central pressure 966 millibars. What can you expect with a Category 2/Category 3 hurricane? Well, you can expect widespread power outages, power failures. We've seen that on Nevis and St. Kitts and Antigua, probably on St. Martin with their 90 to 95 mile per hour wind gusts. Damage to mobile homes, roofs, trees, signs, obviously. The highest winds and the highest exposed elevations, and windows blown out, certainly. Storm surge conditions of 4 to 7 feet, particularly with this scenario. As Dr. Steve Lyons told me, it's different in other locations, but when a hurricane is in this position, 4 to 7 foot storm surges can be expected. Rains of 5 to 10 inches, particularly where it's enhanced over the higher elevations where the airflow is perpendicular to the mountains, and you get that forced lift of the moist air and extra amounts of rainfall. One area that's probably going to be hit pretty hard later on today is the island of Puerto Rico, and with us on the phone this morning once again is Darren Irby with the American Red Cross. Darren, once again, thanks a lot for taking some time to join us. You were telling me just a few minutes ago that there are a lot of people filing into the shelters now.
That's right. The American Red Cross is continuing with our pre-landfall preparations, and we've been supporting the government in their shelter plans and their shelter operations. Thousands of people have stayed in shelters all across the island since the evacuations at 5 p.m. yesterday.
Now, how about preparations? I know everybody was rushing to take their preparations and complete them yesterday, but are there still people out boarding up windows and gathering food and water and ice today?
Pretty much, and these local individuals and families have been through this before, so they're taking this storm very seriously and really preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best.
Okay. Darren Irby with the American Red Cross in San Juan, we thank you for joining us this morning. Well, now let's go to our hurricane expert this morning. Joining me is Dr. Steve Lyons. Steve, let's go to a geographic locator, look at where the islands are, and point out where George is now and where it will be going today.
Well, it's sitting roughly right in here and heading towards St. Thomas and St. Croix and to Puerto Rico. So it's generally going in this direction. It's been past Antigua, and of course St. Martin has had some wind gusts upwards of 100 miles per hour in the last 6 hours. We've already gotten some tropical storm force winds in St. Thomas, and even Roosevelt Rose in Puerto Rico now is gusting to 30 miles per hour. So they're already starting to feel the fringes.
And the hurricane is getting closer to the radar, the Doppler radar out of Puerto Rico, and as you can see here, the eye is clearly visible to the west, southwest of, or I should say the east southeast of St. Croix and the Virgin Islands.
That's right. Here's St. Croix, here's St. Thomas up here. The radar's up here in San Juan and the Coquille Rainforest, and there's roughly the circulation center there. And don't pay attention to the intermediate wiggles. Is a very short time loop. It's continuing to move on generally in this direction.
Okay, Steve, hurricane warnings. They're in effect, obviously, from the Dominican Republic, east and southeast through Puerto Rico, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, down to the island of Dominica. And the wind field, well, Steve, you've been telling me that don't necessarily want to concentrate on the area near the eye wall, but there's a fairly large wind field with this, as seen by the 90-mile-an-hour wind gusts for several hours in St. Martin's.
That's right. If you concentrate on the center, you're going to be sorry because you might miss that center location, and you're going to get strong winds even well away from the circulation center. So if you're in the hurricane warning area, definitely expect hurricane force winds. And keep in mind, this is almost a Category 3 hurricane. It's 110 miles per hour. When the Hurricane Center makes its forecast, it does it in 5-mile-per-hour increments. So it goes 110 or 115. So it's just in the noise on whether or not it's a 110 or 115. Category 3 is 111. So I would take this as a weak Category 3 and be safe if you can.
Now, looking at the satellite picture, it appears obviously weaker than Sunday because yesterday the eye was clearly visible. But, Steve, do you think there is going to be any intensification? The center appears to be out over open water once again.
Well, it's definitely not weakening. You can see the satellite imagery here. The circulation center is roughly around those very strong thunderstorms. And there could be some strengthening before it gets to St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands and also Puerto Rico. It could go back up to 115 or 120 and be officially classified as a 3.
All right, Steve, we know it's going to go through the islands today, affecting the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and then on into the Dominican Republic. But what about after that? Are there any signs in our long-range computer charts that George is going to steer away from the United States?
Well, right now, this is sort of the path swath out through 72 hours right here. And the thing to keep in mind, that 72-hour has significant error. Right now, we don't expect it to recurve to the north at all through 48, and even to 72, it should be generally in this area. It's possible it turns north away from the coast, but this is definitely something the southeastern United States should be keeping very close eyes on.
The best bet is to stay tuned for the latest. And
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Steve. We'll have frequent updates all through today and tonight into the day on Tuesday as well. By the way, if you're away from your television set for any time, you can tune us in online at weather.com to get the latest on George or weather anywhere around the globe, as a matter of fact. Now let's head back to the studio, and here's Vivian.
Well, thanks, Rick. This edition of Weather Center is sponsored by Campbell's. The current scenario stateside shows one surface cold front as it drapes from the central Great Lakes back into the Four Corners.
George, como ustedes pueden observar, se halla en 17.6 grados norte y 64.1 grados oeste. Esto lo sitúa exactamente a 140 millas al este-sudeste de San Juan, Puerto Rico. Tiene vientos máximos de 110 kilómetros por hora. Se ha debilitado desde ayer. Recuerden que George llegó a ser casi un huracán categoría 5, ahora se encuentra en la categoría 2 de la escala Saffir-Simpson y continúa moviéndose al oeste-noroeste a 17 millas por hora. La presión de 966 milibares y pasemos de inmediato a ver la imagen del satélite meteorológico, pero también tenemos que existe un aviso de huracán para todas las grupos norte de las Antillas Menores, también para Puerto Rico y la República Dominicana. Toda esta región se halla bajo huracán. Regresamos con Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Gladys.
The official word across the Northeast Caribbean Sea is rush all hurricane precautions to completion. Hurricane George ripped apart trees, power lines, and homes on the easternmost islands of the Caribbean. Now the dangerous storm is headed toward Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Good morning, I'm Kristen Dodd. For all the latest on Hurricane George, let's join Mark Mancuso in the Forecast Center.
Thank you very much, Kristen, and good morning to you. We have the very latest on Hurricane George, so let's give you that from the Hurricane Center. And here's your 11 a.m. advisory, 17.7 north, 64.3 west. The center of circulation only about 35 miles east of St. Croix. Winds 110 miles per hour. Still a dangerous storm, Category 2, Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Movement continues slightly north of due west there, 16 miles per hour, so it's still moving right along. Estimated pressure 966 millibars. As we take a look at the warnings here, there are some changes to pass along to you. Hurricane watches now being issued for the north coast of Haiti, and also in the Bahamas, a hurricane watch for the southeastern Bahamas and the Turk and Caicos Islands. And the hurricane warnings are discontinued for all islands to the east of the Virgin Islands except for Antigua and Barbuda, where communication with the meteorological service has been interrupted, of course, with our storm in the area, and the French islands of St. Bartholomew and St. Martin, and interest in these areas should maintain precautions until the winds and the seas do subside. Well, along with us this morning, Dr. Steve Lyons. We've been watching this throughout the early morning hours. We have seen some changes from yesterday to today.
Yes, we have. It's been undergoing some fluctuations the last 6 to 12 hours. Started to weaken just a little bit to a very strong Category 2, only a mile an hour away from a Category 3, so that category differential is really irrelevant. But the last few hours we've been seeing a little more of an eye wall starting to form in there, and it's looking like it's starting to intensify a little bit. So all those precautions you're undertaking downstream from the system is all well and good.
And Hurricane George now beginning to pound the Virgin Islands. Puerto Rico is next, and with the storm bearing down on these areas, we do have some important information to pass along to you. The state of emergency declared in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. More than 7,000 people are in shelters across the Northeast Caribbean here, and the National Guard troops are helping patrol streets and evacuate residents. And of course, with our storm bearing down on these areas, tell us more about the impact.
Well, widespread power failures are going to be occurring anywhere near the eye wall or strong wind areas. Damage to mobile homes, some could be completely destroyed. So if you're in a mobile home, evacuate it. If you're in the line of the hurricane, roofs damaged, trees down, lots of signs down. Windows could be blown out if they're not covered in the stronger wind areas. And of course, keep in mind in those island areas, the highest winds will be in the elevated areas above the ground.
And other problems with the storm?
Storm surge 4 to 7 feet in general, although there will be some locations, especially in southeast Puerto Rico, could get well above 10 feet and waves 15 to 20 feet or higher.
And we expect very heavy rains, and nothing like what we saw in Texas, but still a significant factor.
Absolutely, and especially up in the mountains of Puerto Rico, that could be a real problem, even though it continues to move at a pretty good clip to the west.
Okay, we've been watching the storm throughout the nighttime and early morning hours. The storm was a little bit more elongated when we first came into work early this morning, but now as we take a look at our satellite picture, we do see some important changes.
Yeah, it's starting to look a little more organized here. You can start to see the hint of an eye forming right in here, and in the radar we see that even better, but overall the circulation is more circular, like Mark just mentioned. And so this is quite possibly going to be a little bit stronger by the time it reaches Puerto Rico.
And for our viewers, here you can see Puerto Rico here. Notice the clouds just increasing. In the morning really wasn't too bad in San Juan, a few bands of showers, but now we're seeing clouds rapidly increasing, and then off to the east to really see where the weather is deteriorating in through the Virgin Islands.
Here on our radar, you can see here the eye circulation is roughly there, and you can see the bands of deep thunderstorms associated with the eye wall. That's where the strongest winds are all the way around this area here. But there are also some very strong winds in these shower bands well out away from it to the northeast and to the southwest, and it's tracking generally in this direction. So St. Thomas and St. Croix are right in line with where the circulation center is going. So you should be hunkered down and ready for the worst here very shortly.
Yeah, and last night and early this morning, and this squiggly line here that I'm drawing, that's where our center of circulation went through right over Antigua and also right over St. Kitts here. And we've had reports from overnight and early this morning that the winds were as high as 90 to 100 miles an hour. Would you say St. Croix is in line for more of the same?
Absolutely, and St. Thomas as well could get winds, at least gusts, easily to 100 miles per hour. So be prepared for very, very strong winds and gusty, especially in the thunderstorm areas the next 3 to 6 hours.
Okay, the wind profile from earlier this morning showing you the field of winds around the storm, but as we get you the updated graphic right here, tell us more about that.
Yeah, this is these are the wind gusts, most recent wind gusts here, and you can see here these are basically 50 to 65 mile per hour gusts, and of course the strongest winds are not necessarily included in this right now because the circulation center's right about in here, heading generally this way. So Very, very strong winds even on the periphery, so keep in mind, even though you're not right in line with the center of the circulation, you can still receive some very strong winds, especially in association with strong thunderstorms.
Okay, and with that wind increasing in the Virgin Islands, we have with us on the phone Colonel Gene Walker, the State Director of Emergency Management Agency in the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. And could you tell us, Colonel, what's the weather like right now in St. Thomas?
Good morning to everyone. Yes, the weather right now, as was indicated, we are having high winds in the island of St. Croix, gusting up to about 60 miles per hour. And also on the islands of St. Thomas, St. John, and Water Island, we are having winds right now of about 40 miles per hour. As was pointed out, the coordinates are 17.6 and 63.7 west, and the storm was approximately 60 miles east-southeast of St. Croix at about 8:03 this morning.
Have you had any reports of any damage or injuries with the storm as it passed through the Northeast Islands overnight?
No, not really overnight, but this morning we had some tree branches and what have you on the island of St. Thomas that were actually blown down. We have approximately 1,800 folks in shelters at this particular time. And the governor, of course, has gone on radio as early as 6 o'clock this morning. He was also on Good Morning America at about 7:30 this morning, talking to the people of the territory, asking them to be calm. The governor, of course, has imposed a curfew as of 8 o'clock last night, and that curfew remains in effect until the all-clear sign has been given. We, of course, are concerned about our residents staying off the streets in fear that of their safety. So that's where we are right now.
Well, very good. You're still going to get much worse weather than you have just reported. You're still on the periphery, and it's still heading generally in your direction. So stay down, hunker tight.
Thank you so very much, and thanks for your concern.
Okay, thank you very much. And that was Gene Walker, State Director of Emergency Management in the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. How about the future of the storm, Dr. Steve Lyons?
Well, it looks like it's going to continue on a general west-northwest track here the next 24 to 36 hours. May catch some of the islands on its way. Of course, we have
at a pretty good clip at 16 miles an hour, so the storm is still moving right along here. Estimated pressure and now at 971 millibars. Hurricane Hunter.
How will it affect where you're headed? What about your plans? People count on us to get through the day. I love that.
Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
Good morning. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso with you for this edition of your Tropical Update. Here is Hurricane George moving through the Northeast Caribbean islands, the very latest from the Hurricane Center. As of 11 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, 17.7 north, 64.3 west, or about 35 miles east of St. Croix is our center of circulation. Movement still slightly north of due west at a pretty good clip, 16 miles per hour. Pressure now from the hurricane hunters up just a little bit to 971 millibars. At the present time, hurricane warnings continue in effect for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Antigua and Barbuda, while to the west, Hurricane watches now for the north coast of Haiti and for the southeastern Bahamas, with an anticipated movement off toward the west-northwest with our hurricane. As we look at the wind profile for you, there you can see the tropical storm force winds now just coming into eastern Puerto Rico around Roosevelt Roads and around Vieques. We're looking at tropical storm force winds, St. Thomas and St. Croix. Hurricane force winds coming into the area right now. Power has been shut down on those islands. Center of the storm went right across Antigua last night and across St. Kitts, and we had reports of winds of 90 to 110 miles per hour. Unofficial reports of winds that high, and of course a lot of power outages and a lot of problems with power lines down and with trees being snapped. Here's a look at the infrared satellite picture. You can see a lot of darkening on the red here, signs of possible reorganization of our storm as it bears down on St. Croix. Here's where our center of circulation is right here, just off to the east of St. Croix, moving off to the west-northwest. So that will put St. Thomas and also San Juan on the north side of our center of circulation. So they're in for quite a blow there and a lot of heavy winds. Look for hurricane force conditions to come into San Juan probably by the early evening hour. As you can see, there's another tropical storm out there. Its name is Ivan. Unfortunately, we have the wrong symbol here. This is a hurricane symbol. It is a tropical storm. Winds only 40 miles an hour. Movement, though, northwest. This will not be a threat to any land areas. And here you can see Ivan moving its way up to the northwest of the Cape Verde Islands. But look at this, another strong tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa. We'll have to keep a close eye on this one, too. And in the Caribbean, the weather pretty